Gravels. However, the gravels it was found in was sandwiched between two layers of the walnut shale. This is from the time of the dinosaurs. So let's take a quick look at ancient technology for a quick second. The two are kind of intimately related. Where do we see pyramids today? Where else? South America, Mexico, Peru. In fact, you find pyramids all over the world. Why would people be building pyramids all over the world? Seems like a strange oddity, and in fact, there are tons of similarities like this throughout all cultures around the world. My good friend Vance Nelson is actually working on a book right now, which I've forgotten the name of it right now, but he's either going to get the book done or he's going to do a video, depending on which. But he ties all this back to the time of the Babylonian culture. You got to remember, according to the scriptures, all cultures came from one place, Babylon. Now, even right here in North America, you see pyramids in the form of mounds. They're mounds of dirt. I finally got to see one. This is in Ohio, and it is exactly like a pyramid, complete with the steps up to the top, which is flat, exactly like the Mayan pyramids. Exactly. Just made out of dirt instead of rock. It's the only difference. You find pyramids all over the world. Why? Well, because the Tower of Babel wasn't a tower, it was actually a pyramid. And so all these cultures split off from a pyramid, and this is presumably what it would have looked like when it was finished. It's still around today, the remains of it. It's the temple, or the ziggurat of Ur. It's a huge monstrosity, and most of it is still around today. So you see these cultures all coming from the same culture, which all have ties. And one of the things that my friend Vance Nelson gets into is things like boomerangs. Where do you find boomerangs nowadays? Australia? And? Exactly. Nobody realizes it. Do you realize boomerangs were found right here in North America? Not just Australia, North America, South America, even in the Arctic. You find them all around the world. There's another kind of weapon called an atlatl. And again, this is another thing that Vance has done a pile of research on. Get his book when it comes out, or get his video when it comes out, depending on which he gets done first. It is fascinating stuff, and I've been sworn to secrecy. I'm not allowed to tell you any more than that. But do get the book. It's going to be fantastic stuff. He ties it all back to the time of Babylon, and everybody came from one culture. Again, it lines up with the scriptures. Now, when you take a look at some of these ancient structures, for instance, you ask the Mayans, we can't figure out how they even built those pyramids. You see, people were more intelligent in the past. And today, the central air conditioning and heating system in those Aztec and Mayan pyramids still works. They just use natural cooling. It's a nice, cool temperature inside the pyramids. Why? Because they designed it that way. They were smart people. When you ask the Mayans and Aztecs, how did you build these pyramids, because nobody knows, they tell you a very strange story. They say they actually used drums and trumpets to move the stones. Now, I don't know about you. My skeptical knee-jerk reaction is to go, oh, come on. Really, come on. Don't tell me that. But the thing that we got to remember is they obviously know something we don't. And our modern arrogance tends to get the better of us. We think we're smarter because that's what we've been taught. However, take a look at this one. These are called the Baalbek stones. There's actually 3 of them. They're called the trilithons. Each stone is in excess of 1 1,000 tons in weight. One single carved stone. They didn't just carve it, they moved it and built a temple on them. Here's another one, still sitting in the quarry. How on earth did they move those? Our best cranes today, we have cranes that will pick them up, but they take so much space, they can't pick them up there and move them to where they were. Our most modern advanced technology, and take a look at the cranes we got today. Now, a lot of people have just said, oh, they just used a whole bunch of people, some ropes and pulleys and logs. Makes no sense at all. They haven't done the math or the physics. It doesn't work. You'll snap the ropes, you'll crush the logs, and bury everything under the 1,000 tons or more of weight. So how on earth did they move them? Nobody knows. However, there has been a lot of talk. Again, if you talk to the Mayans and Aztecs, they claim they moved them with drums and trumpets. Some have claimed to actually witness these ceremonies where they actually levitated rocks using drums and trumpets. I don't know if it's true or not, but I do know there's been a number of patents over the years that have used acoustics to levitate things, and there's some that are still being worked on today. This is not far from here. This is down in Geneva, Illinois. This is a supposed acoustical levitation machine. It's on display in the Geneva Historic Society. And by the way, I had to get special permission to get these photographs, okay? They normally do not allow permission to, or normally don't allow you to take photographs. I've wanted to take photographs of this for years. Now, this one never actually worked, but the conclusion we were told by John Kopek, who was unfortunately died in 2004, John related to us that they concluded the reason it didn't work was because their tolerances weren't tight enough. But they suspected it could work. So again, this whole idea, is it possible they moved them with sound? Hey, maybe. All I'm saying is they were really smart people and they figured it out somehow in a way that we have not been able to figure it out. Mm-hmm.
Could that explain the rock formations on Easter Island?
Possibly. Yeah, because that's another mystery as well. Easter Island is another big mystery. The guy who built Coral Castle, he did it somehow. Nobody knows how. But again, he did it somehow. And one of his comments in passing was he figured out how they built the pyramids. And that he never did tell people what he did or how he did it. Okay, now, coming back to the dinosaurs and humans thing. Again, what I'm trying to impress upon you, number one, people were very smart in the past, but they've also been around throughout all of Earth's history. That's what I've been trying to hit home here. Now, what you see here are actually pieces of soft tissue from a T-Rex bone. Now, Mary Schweitzer and her team, a number of years prior to this, had actually found what they believed were red blood cells still in a T-Rex fever. These are supposed to be 60 to 100 million years old, depending on who you ask. Every single scientific study that has been performed says that it is not possible for any soft tissue or blood vessels or blood cells to last 60 million years. They deteriorate and decay way too fast, even under the best of conditions. Even when you freeze them, they still deteriorate and decay. So, 60 million years old? Tell you what, even from a creationist perspective, as a creationist, I believe those bones are 4,500 years old. Even then, to me, it's still a stretch to believe that these tissues could still be soft after 4,500 years. And when I say soft, I mean soft. See that little stretchy part right there? They actually stretch that, and when you let it go, it actually pulls back into its original position. That's how fresh these things are. 60 million years old? I don't think so. Highly unlikely. Now, this is an interesting find. Unfortunately, a lot of creationists have bought into the flagrant lies, I will call it what it is, that several anti-creationists have propagated. This is the Joyeux Maru cryptid. A Japanese fishing trawler, the Joyeux Maru, was fishing off the coast of New Zealand. It was dredging off the bottom of the ocean. In their nets, they caught this huge dead creature that for the world sure looks like a plesiosaur. Now, plesiosaurs have different shapes. You can see how long the neck is on this one and how short it is on this one, how long the body is, etc. But plesiosaurs have a long neck, small head, 4 large flippers and a tail. Those are the key identifying features of a plesiosaur. Again, supposed to have been extinct some 60 million years ago, 100 million years ago, the time of the dinosaurs, basically. There's another view of the same creature. And there's the back view. And these are all, by the way, available on the website, getit.org, as well as an excellent article I'm going to refer you to in a second. So the gentleman who took these pictures was actually a qualified marine biologist. He couldn't identify it. And it caused a storm back in Japan. Now, unfortunately, what they did, because they're thousands of miles from home, they've got their life's catch, this is their livelihood, they didn't want to contaminate their catch, so they threw it back. Fortunately, Yano took pictures and documented it in drawings as well before they threw it back. Now, several key points here, and the article I want to point you to is by Malcolm Bowden. Did an excellent research report on this, and rather than reinvent the wheel, I will simply point you to his article and give you some of the highlights. Number one, okay, many anti-creationists, and unfortunately many creationists, have claimed it was a basking shark, a decaying basking shark. Hogwash. It cannot be a basking shark. There are a number of reasons why. The flippers are narrow at the body, not wide like a shark. You've seen the flippers on fish? Same principle. They're narrow at the tips and they get wide at the body. The flippers on this creature were radically different. They were narrow at the body, flared out, and got narrow at the tips, exactly like a plesiosaur, and not like a basking shark. There was all 4 flippers. There was 4 flippers. That, first of all, is a surprise. All 4 flippers were the same size, roughly. Again, indicative of a plesiosaur, not a shark, which has larger flippers on the front, smaller fins on the back. Basking sharks do not have red flesh. If you noted carefully in the pictures, actually, you know what? I'm going to back up a hair so you can see it for yourself. Notice the red flesh visible at the spine. All this other white stuff is decaying fat. I'm going to come back to that as well. Deteriorating fat. So basking sharks do not have red flesh. That rules out the basking shark. Now, unfortunately, you got to watch out for this. Some evolutionists, in arguing for the basking shark, watch carefully what happens. One of them said, yeah, but this other kind of shark, its flesh is as red as a tuna if you open it up. That's true, but that wasn't a basking shark. So if you see what happened here, they did a bait and switch. They were talking about the basking shark, arguing for a basking shark, then suddenly referred to a shark that was not the basking shark, and said, but it's red. Basking sharks have no red flesh. You can't argue 2 different sharks at the same time. It is not a basking shark. Basking sharks do not have fat. As Yano pointed out, this was decaying fatty flesh. There was the absence of pneumonia. When sharks decay, they give off ammonia. It's a very distinct smell. You can't miss it. And these are marine biologists. These are fishermen. They know what they're talking about, and they know what they're doing. It's not like they're amateurs. There was no dorsal fin. In other words, the fin going down the spine, it was gone. Completely absent. Some have argued that the dorsal fin had flopped down the side, and that looked like a flipper. Well, if you paid close attention to the photographs, you'll notice I showed you both sides. Both sides apparently had a flopped over dorsal fin then. Makes no sense. There was no dorsal fin, again, ruling out the idea of a basking shark. Lastly, when basking sharks die, they float. They are scavenged. There was no evidence of scavenging, and this carcass was sitting on the bottom of the ocean. It sank. It was negatively buoyant, not positively buoyant as a dead basking shark is. It was dredged up from 900 feet below the surface. It was not a basking shark. The most likely explanation, it is a plesiosaur-like creature, some kind of mammal. There are some slight differences, but as you saw for yourself, there are variations even within the plesiosaurs. Perhaps variations we don't even know about. Now, for further reading, if you want to follow up on this, of course, Malcolm Bowden's article, which I just referred to, there's the full web address there. And then there's another gentleman by the name of John Koster, and that is where I got those photos from, and that's on the Genet website, and that's the web address for that. And that was from the Missouri Association for Creation. Both of them are excellent articles. Basically, John Koster started off his article. He wanted to show you what the scientific community did not want you to see. And so they published the photographs, and did a follow-up article. Excellent reading. Check it out from there. Now, I just showed you a possible dinosaur-like creature, possibly still alive today, and I'm going to come back to the coelacanth later on, because that also ties in with this, but that's for another lecture. These photographs I'm going to show you are, once again, fossil human skeletons. Completely modern, but they come from the Dakota Sandstone in Moab, Utah. As you can see, they're articulated. These come from my good friend Don Patton, down in Texas. And Don, Carl Baugh, the Creation Evidence Museum, Joe Taylor, and team went up to Utah to excavate several of these in the 90s. The first group was found in the 70s by this guy, Dale Fuller. Again, my good friend Vance Nelson, who is an amazing researcher, and he is like the typical Canadian Mountie. He always gets his man. He did not have the name of this guy, and he still tracked him down, calling all over the United States until he found him. And he found him, and he interviewed him over the phone personally. So we got the scoop. What happened was Dale Fuller was bulldozing in this mine. I believe it was a copper mine. And what happened is he dug up these bones. When you're driving a bulldozer, you can't see in front of you. So as he's bulldozing along, he struck these bones. In his mind, this is an Indian burial site. He didn't think it through that it took a bulldozer to remove the solid rock to expose the bones. He didn't clue in. But he assumed they were Indian remains, so he covered them again. In the meantime, while he went away, a guy by the name of Lynn Ottinger, who is a local rock hound. I've actually gotten to meet his son. I've been to Lynn Ottinger's rock shop. Lynn Ottinger came by with a group of fossil rock hounds, knelt down with his brush, swept away the dirt, and made the find of the century. And so there was a misperception that was conveyed that these rocks were not buried in solid stone. They were in solid sandstone. In fact, the solid sandstone was so hard that they actually stopped mining there. They actually closed the mine down because it was just too hard to mine. There's Dale Fuller pointing to the very spot he first dug up the fossil bones. Now, this is all in the Dakota Sandstone, okay? Now, the bones have actually become permineralized with things like malachite, for instance, gives it a blue tinge, copper, etc. And it's actually turned all the stones into a very beautiful blue color. Azurite and different minerals like that involved. But here's the thing. There was 10 skeletons of men, women, and children found, total. Now, again, you remember I mentioned before, whenever we find an out-of-place artifact or an out-of-place fossil, the first thing they assume is that there was a crack in the ground, that these poor people walked along and fell into the crack. Well, there's a lot of problems with that. Number one, there was no evidence of a crack. Dale Fuller saw no faulting anywhere. In fact, he's able to point out to you where the faults in the mine were. None were where he dug up the skeleton. And they had excavated for years above that skeleton, slowly removing solid rock. These skeletons were in solid rock. Others came up with the crazy idea that it was Indians who were mining and the mine collapsed. Well, no broken bones, and mines just don't seem like the kind of place to have women and children either. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just doesn't seem like the right place. But here's the thing. They're embedded in the Dakota Sandstone, which is supposedly dated at 100 million years old, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. Again, the time of the dinosaurs, completely modern human skeletons. Now, let's get to one of my more favorite places. Let's head on down to Texas. This is the Paluxy Riverbed. And what you're looking at here is actually the longest trail of dinosaur tracks. The Paluxy is literally world famous as a mega track site. There are dinosaur tracks all over the place. If you ever get the chance to go, you have to go and visit it. And I remember the first time I walked down the river, I had never seen a dinosaur track before. I didn't know what I was looking for. I'm walking down the river going, gee, I hope I find one. And then practically fell into one. They're all over the place. And some of them are huge. You can take a bath in them. This particular trail is 157 tracks long, extending over 500 feet. It is now the longest trail in the world. It was first discovered in the 1970s by a guy by the name of Mike Turnage. It was later excavated by the Creation Evidence Museum, Don Patton and team and friends, in the year 2000. Now, the reason I bring this up, first of all, it's an important find. It is the longest continuous dinosaur trail known to date. However, a number of individuals, evolutionary individuals who are not very fond of the creationists, have since laid claim basically to the trail and have named it after themselves instead of the Turnage-Patton Trail. No, it was originally discovered by Mike Turnage and Don Patton. I'd just like to set the record straight. It was a major find, but once again, the creationists get the short end of the stick because the evolutionists are basically in control of academia, and they say what goes and what does not go. Now, I want to take a look at the Paluxy situation, so you understand it. And first, I want to give you a tour through the exciting life of a clam. There's the clams spending their nice day basking in the sun, eating something, I don't know what, I'm afraid to ask. But anyway, clams, you'll notice, typically live in two ways. In this case, this is in Canada, they are buried, end up in the dirt, okay? So they're either buried in the dirt, end up, or they actually glue their hinge to a rock or something, okay? Now, when they die, they fall open. Now, there are some clams and oysters, actually, I'm not sure about oysters, but I know there are some clams that do not open when they die. The clams I'm about to show you do open when they die. Okay, they actually pull themselves closed, so they actually fall open when they die. Even when they move around, they are still in the upright position. You can actually see the trail where it's moving around. They open their shell a little bit, and they have a little foot, and they shove themselves along with their little foot. So even when they're moving, they're still in the upright position. Now, let's take a look at the Paluxy Riverbed. Again, this is all part of the Austin Chalk sequence that I talked about a couple sessions ago. And there's several layers. This is more of the marl layer that's in between them. But the clams, the fossil clams, are found all throughout the layers, including the layers with the dinosaur tracks. When you take a look, the shells are all over the place. There's got to be billions of them, literally. You can see there's fossil shell, fossil shell, fossil shell, fossil shell. Notice not one of them are upright. They have been ripped up from either what they were anchored to or the dirt they were anchored in and tumbled. Now, I did a study a couple of years ago. I documented hundreds of them. Not one was in the living position. Clear indication of catastrophic ripping up and burying in the dirt, contrary to what you see in the common literature, which says that they were buried in situ or buried in the living position. There was nothing common gentle about this. This was a catastrophe. Now, those layers have tons of dinosaur tracks in them and what sure look like human footprints, fossil human footprints. Among the dinosaur tracks, beside the dinosaur tracks, sometimes in the dinosaur tracks, sometimes the dinosaur tracks overlap the human tracks. So let's take a look at some of those tracks. You saw some already. You saw footprints from the Taylor Trail the other day. That is the Taylor Trail right there. It is a sequence of 14 tracks, right, left, right, left, right, left. Now, some have tried to argue that the human-like prints are actually only badly eroded dinosaur tracks. Nonsense. First of all, when you take a look at the trail, the human footprint impression, while it does step in the dinosaur tracks, moves around and changes position within the dinosaur tracks, even eventually leaving the dinosaur trail and joining another trail going in the opposite direction. These are clearly what has gone on here. The dinosaur walked in the mud, and then shortly thereafter, a human walked in the footprints of the dinosaur. Why would a human do that? Have you ever tried to walk through deep snow or walk in mud? If you follow the footprints of another person, it's easier going, isn't it? Even dogs will do that. So it makes sense. It lines up with the human psyche that these would be human footprints. It's easier walking in the mud. It's that simple. Easier walking. So this rules out the idea that it is eroded dinosaur tracks. I'm going to give you other reasons for that. There's one of the tracks there. Again, fairly clear. You can actually see some of the toe impressions. This is the +5. This is one of the more vague tracks. This one comes from the upper Taylor platform. All 5 toes are there in the impression. However, pay close attention. Again, This is not some strangely eroded dinosaur track. The dinosaur track, clear as day, there it is. The dinosaur track is raised. In other words, differential erosion has eroded away some of the rock, but left the rock inside the dinosaur track. But the human footprint that's in it is actually depressed into the rock. They're clearly not the same track. A human stepped on a dinosaur track. Now, I showed this one the other day. I'm going to go over it again real quick. And I'll bring it over to the camera again so the camera can get a good look. This is the Taylor -3B track. Let me grab my remote control, because I'm going to show you what happened next. This is one of the tracks in the Taylor Trail sequence. You can see the dinosaur track, clear as day, there it is. Again, I've painted this false color for the sake of cameras and audiences. But within that, you can see where the human footprint went in, left toe impressions and a heel impression, slid back, and when it lifted, it left an impression of all 5 toes, the ball, the arch, and the heel. The whole track is there. Clear as day, that is a genuine fossil human footprint. Some have said and thrown out the ridiculous ad hoc argument that these tracks were carved to be human-like. Tracks like this one were actually excavated under 10 to 18 inches of undisturbed limestone in the presence of multiple witnesses. These are not carvings. That is an ad hoc argument that does not stack up to the evidence, and people who say things like that need to spend more time in the Biloxi instead of sitting behind their desks and arguing. But anyway, here's what happened. The day after Don Patton went public with this track, they showed photographs of it. He said, "This is clear evidence that dinosaurs and humans lived together." The day after, somebody went into the Biloxi riverbed and smashed the track to smithereens. In fact, there were a number of the human fossil footprints that were smashed to smithereens, but only the human fossil footprints. Somebody does not want you knowing the truth. Bottom line. Now, the fossil cat print, which again is just as damaging to the evolutionary model, cats were not supposed to have evolved until 54 million years after the dinosaurs became extinct, yet here's their footprints right alongside the dinosaur tracks, and again, sectioned, as you can see, in a number of different ways, and there you can see the pressure lines present from the fossil footprint. These are genuine fossil footprints among dinosaur footprints, and they should not be there. This is science's best explanation for dinosaur tracks and human tracks found together.